Hi, this is Mark Smith, and it is mid-April of 2014. I'd like to take just a few moments to give an update on the current state of the economic cycle that we're in and just how that is impacting decisions that are being made in client portfolios. We're going to look at four primary themes. We're going to look at the U.S. economic cycle. We're also going to be looking at both U.S. equities and fixed income, and we're also going to be looking at foreign markets as well. I'd like to say thank you to JP Morgan and their investment strategist team for allowing me to use some of their slides, and I hope you find this helpful. Please note, as we review these slides, it will be best if you view the video in full screen. Also, you can click the screen to pause if needed. First, let's look at the U.S. business cycle. To use a baseball analogy, we're likely somewhere in the middle innings of a long game. This June marks the 6th year of the U.S. economic recovery. Although the recovery has faced uncertainty stemming from geopolitical concerns, Washington policy, unprecedented central bank intervention, and even the weather, the U.S. economy never suffered a double-dip recession as many had feared it would. Instead, this recovery will soon rank as the 6th longest period of growth on record, even though economic data suggests we are not yet at the 7th inning stretch. During this recovery, as shown on the left side of slide 18, we have seen moderate growth averaging 2.3% each year, below the average growth rates during prior recoveries. Despite this, GDP in 2014 is likely to grow at a rate close to 3%, near the long-run historical average of 3.1%. This is because the components of GDP on the right of the slide should contribute more to GDP in 2014. Consumers in particular have seen a significant recovery in household net worth and confidence. Economic drag from the government sector is diminished in 2014 as the effects of the federal budget sequestration, local and state spending cuts, and government shutdowns are behind us. Corporations are also likely to increase investment spending as they reach higher levels of capacity utilization and new peaks in employment. Looking next at the labor market on slide 25, we see a slowly improving picture. Unemployment has fallen steadily from 10% at its peak to 6.7% today. This is due to both increased hiring as economic activity has improved and to falling labor force participation as individuals have dropped out of the workforce. The labor market has almost reached a new peak in employment, with 8.7 million private sector jobs gained following the loss of 8.8 million jobs. Much of this job creation has been in high-quality jobs involving the financial services and healthcare sectors, as seen in the lower left chart. Although labor force participation is falling, this is mainly due to demographic trends as baby boomers approach retirement age. Broader measures of unemployment that account for falling labor force participation do also show labor market improvements. Still, the large population of long-term unemployed and discouraged workers is a problem that will only gradually improve with time. Most importantly, in the lower right, wages are growing at a rate of 2.5% year over year for production non-supervisory workers, which should boost consumer spending. Finally, persistently low inflation suggests that the economy is not overheating just yet. Inflation tends to increase when the business cycle reaches the late innings as manufacturing reaches full capacity and the labor market exceeds full employment. Therefore, inflation is an important indicator to monitor as the business cycle matures. Unlike prior recoveries, unprecedented monetary policy by the Federal Reserve may have prevented deflation in 2008 and 2009, but may also spur inflation as the economy improves and bank lending recovers. In slide 27, you can see both headline inflation and core inflation, which excludes food and energy, remain well below historical levels, and inflation remains well below the Federal Reserve's long-run target of 2%. Let's now look at foreign economies, more specifically Europe, which is likely still in the early innings of recovery. On slide 49, we see both high unemployment and low inflation in Europe. The chart on the right highlights the vastly divergent employment picture between European countries. These challenges explain much of Europe's slow recovery, and it will take years to fully address the issues of an uncompetitive and aging workforce. On slide 48, we see both economic headwinds and tailwinds in Europe. In the upper left, there has been a dramatic improvement in funding costs as risk has receded. On the right, similar to the U.S., the fiscal drag of government policies and funding costs is also receding. However, in the lower left, credit growth is not yet emerging in Europe, which remains yet a headwind to economic recovery. On slide 50, we see corporate earnings in Europe compared to the U.S. European profit margins remain well below U.S. levels, but we need to remember Europe had not one but two recessions over the last 6 years. There is now evidence that Europe's recovery is becoming broader based, and any acceleration in revenue growth would translate into increased earnings. Turning to the U.S. equity market on slide 8, we see record earnings levels which have driven the increase in stock prices. Impressively, as shown on the bottom right chart, this has been done without increased debt leverage, keeping corporate balance sheets quite healthy. As leverage increases in the coming years, it should help support growth in profits and ultimately stock prices. Against this backdrop of economic growth and record profits, stocks do not yet appear expensive. The top of slide 7 highlights a number of different valuation metrics for the S&P 500. While the U.S. equity markets are clearly no longer attractive in absolute terms, they appear to be in line with their long-term average valuations. Thinking about valuation in relative terms, however, tells a different story. The chart on the bottom right of page 7 illustrates the relative valuation in stocks versus bonds by looking at the earnings yield of the S&P 500 along with the yield on corporate bonds. While stocks may no longer look cheap in absolute terms, they continue to offer value in relative terms. Allocation within U.S. equities is important as well, since parts of the U.S. stock market appear more attractive than others. This has driven several changes by the investment team in recent weeks. Turning to bonds on slide 33, this somewhat complicated chart demonstrates that great differentiation exists across fixed income sectors. U.S. Treasuries rely on only two sources of return, the price return and coupon, while others, such as corporate bonds, high-yield bonds, and floating rate bonds, can additionally benefit from tighter spreads to Treasuries. Last year, the sectors that performed best are those that saw their creditworthiness improve, and tighter spreads along with the coupon helped offset the price declines from rising yields. Remember, as yields rise, prices fall, but this can be offset by the coupon and the spread to Treasury yields. The takeaway from this slide is there are multiple facets to managing bonds in the increasing rate environment that began in 2013. Finally, given that volatility in the equity markets is ever present, I think it's helpful to share slide 15. This chart shows the annual return of U.S. stocks over the last 34 years. Even though returns were positive in 26 of 34 years, each year has some amount of decline during the year, some of which are significant. This is important perspective to keep while we live through the ups and downs of the equity market. So that is a brief update on some key themes that we are looking at in the markets and for using and making decisions around client portfolios. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, and thanks for watching.